What are the do nots for property investors?
Do not, because an average growth in Australia is about 5%. You want to revert it back to a 5% growth, you know, and then you really got a good asset there, you know.
Yeah.
And if you layer those assets like that in a portfolio of 10 or 15 properties, you're onto something. Economy is important, but what good is economy to me if it doesn't reflect in purchasing patterns on the ground? And again, you see that in a lot of WA areas. You see very wealthy areas that are declining in value, for example, some of them, because again, industry centralization. So if I wanted to address your economy question, every data point is a reflection of behavior. If you see something growing and then growing negatively for a long period of time, there is a reason for it. A lot of people want to find out why. Sometimes what is sufficient. By what I mean,
What are the top 3 do's for a property investor?
education is the primary thing. I think that the space is riddled with...
I'm more and more intrigued. The information provided in this podcast is for general purposes only and should not be considered personal advice. Always consult with qualified professionals or experts in the relevant field for personalized advice tailored to your specific situation. How do you know if an area is overheated?
There are a couple of parameters that you're looking at. You're looking at a dramatically rising unaffordability.
Dramatically rising unaffordability.
Yeah, so if you look at the curve or the trend in unaffordability or affordability index, if it's dramatically rising, that's one sign, and now we have to layer it. The next sign would be obviously a dramatic reducing supply, still a reducing supply and an increasing demand, which means it still has more growth, but paired with rising unaffordability, you can see that the friction point is happening, a bottleneck, where people will start dropping off. So you need to combine a few metrics there. And another indicator that you can layer on top of that would be its past growth. I mean, anything that is generating 25% annual growth is substantial growth. And if you compare that with rising unaffordability and then still supply and demand, supply dropping and demand increasing, that means that unaffordability would rise even further and it will hit a friction point where internal demand, i.e. demand from owner-occupiers and residents, will start dropping off.
And
you'll see an increase in days on market. You'll see an increase in days on market and reduction in growth.
Yeah, right.
So it's very hard to determine, to pinpoint the exact time of how much an area that's overheated has left to go. If you still see supply and demand trends, long-term trends, let's say supply trend that's reducing and demand is increasing, you know that it potentially could have maybe 1 or 2 years, but I always allow a contingency factor. And I say 1 year and then you exit. You're giving yourself, you're giving yourself some fat, but it is a combination of 4 factors. It will be exorbitant price growth in the last year. It will be substantially rising unaffordability and then the supply and demand dynamics.
So for somebody who's listening at home, the biggest indicator would be if owner-occupiers...
Yeah, so you actually don't know whether they're exiting. You can see whether they're exiting by the days on market increasing, the recent trend in the days on market increasing. So for example, if you have an overall trend that's reducing, but let's say you can see in the last couple of months or data releases that it's going from 15 days on market to 20, then 25, then 30. You can see that the demand is dropping off. Yes, the trend is still trending downwards, but the short-term trend is increasing, which means that the demand is weakening. And then you need to look at unaffordability. Think about it this way. I always say this to people. When I moved to Australia in 2000s, I could fill 2 shopping trolleys with $50. Now it takes me $300 to fill one. And it rearranges my lifestyle and my decision making. So in the same way, when in a short period of time, unaffordability increases dramatically, you know that it's going to reshape the behavior of its residents and it's going to affect the owner-occupier cohort. Sooner or later, it will start dropping off because you never have a perpetual hotspot. You never have a perpetual anything, let alone a hotspot, because of these dynamics.
How long should a hotspot area go for?
It goes for it varies. It can go between 2 and 4 years.
So typically between 2 and 4 years,
Correct.
3 years is sweet spot.
Correct.
Okay.
And as everything else, the faster it goes up, the downtrend could be more severe because it hits that huge friction point where everyone just starts exiting. And we see that in some areas in Perth now where we see buyers agents being so freaked out about the whole situation where they're trying to exit as well as the owner-occupier cohort. So with anything in property, compounding is a phenomenal factor, but exuberance in compounding will inadvertently lead to a drop off that's equally exuberant. Now, not equally exuberant. If you see something grow 40% in a year, it will not drop 40% down, but it will drop more than an average drop across Australia.
And so then it's critical, I guess, the time you enter into that hotspot.
Correct, which is why the warm spot methodology is important, because you leverage the full cycle of the hotspot.
You're right at the bottom.
Correct.
As it's coming out.
Correct. You're leveraging the full cycle. When you enter a particular hotspot, there are certain things to look at, as I said, affordability, to see how much steam it's got left. But you essentially are working with a time frame of 2 to 3 years potentially if you enter at the beginning.
Yeah. So a warm spot to become a hotspot will be 2 to 3 years.
Yeah, it will be about 2 years.
Yeah.
And then you have about between 2 to 4 years of a hotspot. Then it starts subsiding and reverting back to the average, or what people usually use the term reverting back to the mean, if you want it.
But that means you've already had 6 years of growth.
Absolutely. That's it, exactly.
Which is pretty ridiculous.
That's right. And then,
ridiculously good.
And there are some indicators that you need to look at to ensure that the area will perform long-term, which means that even if it starts dropping off from that hotspot, it's not going to be a nosedive down. It will revert to, because an average growth in Australia is about 5%. You will want it reverting back to a 5% growth, you know? And then you really got a good asset there, and if you layer those assets like that in a portfolio of 10 or 15 properties, you're onto something.
Well, I think you've already covered this, but is there data to point out when a price collapse could arise?
Collapse, we first have to define that term in percentage terms. What is a collapse? But essentially, I did cover it in a sense that, you see, I think, maybe, is it Rockingham in WA? It has very high unaffordability. It has grown substantially in the last couple of years, and you will see a price drop in that area. It is eventual. Now, when I say collapse, property in Australia is not collapsing yet, nor will it collapse potentially, because the entire system is built on property, Will you see negative growth in some areas? Absolutely. And most of the areas in WA, if you look at the suburb level, have spent substantial amount of time in the negative growth zone, i.e. minus 3%, minus 5%, minus 10% some. Newman has seen minus 60% growth in the last 10 years. Well, that would be a collapse, I would say. So if I term a collapse negative growth, yes, it happens, and it happens when, people start exiting, demand weakens, and potentially there is too much supply in the market, which is not absorbed by the demand. And then the price starts nosediving for some time until it rebounds after a couple of years thereafter. So it's never a single metric answer. It's always a collection of few. But a lot of areas go through negative growth. Melbourne, for example, which is, everyone talks about it like it's the plague. Damn
that land tax.
Yeah. I mean, it's a cost of business is what I see. And I do understand that, certain briefs, because there's an issues with yields, might not fit that area. I do understand. And as I said initially, brief determine where you're going to invest, you know. But if we look at the growth rate cycles in the past, Melbourne has spent much less in the negative growth zone than WA areas or Perth. So if I'm going to use the collapse methodology, Melbourne has collapsed much less than Perth has in the past. Some areas haven't even seen negative growth at all.
In Melbourne,
In Melbourne, Taylor Hills, for example.
I saw your recent one.
Yeah. I love that area. It's a very good area. But again, it's for me, but it all depends what your brief is. But essentially, if you look at the growth rate cycle or how much it's grown, some areas go into the negative growth zone and do so substantially. Yeah. In some areas, you see minus 10% growth. Yeah. For a period of 2 or 3 years. Yeah. Which is why, you need to assess the growth rate patterns in the past to understand, because every data point is a reflection of behavior. If you see something growing and then growing negatively for a long period of time, there is a reason for it. Now, a lot of people want to find out why. Sometimes what is sufficient. By what I mean, if I look at a large enough data set spanning back 2 decades, and I see that an area is spending a lot of time in the negative growth zone, what does that mean on the ground? It means that people buy and then they sell off suddenly and sell off substantially. Why they're selling off, it could be many factors, industry centralization, etc., whatever it is. But sometimes it's just the what. I'm looking at the what.
Yeah.
And you know how they say past performance is not indicative of future performance? Absolutely. But then what I say to them is that's the only time frame that you have to analyze.
Yeah, right.
To reach a decision.
Yeah.
So usually people that say that try to reach a decision on a hypothetical scenario that might happen in the future. They even traversing more into the abstract zone than I am. Yeah. What I'm doing is I'm analyzing past behavior. Now, it might not happen in the future, but I need to consider it in my analysis. Simple as that. That's what governments do. They don't have a crystal ball where they know what's going to happen in the future. And if they do, they look at it from past behavior and cycles. That's what hedge funds do.
Are Perth and Brisbane markets overcooked?
So by overcooked, it would mean, are they hotspots and how long do they have left? Now, what we're doing, we're speaking about markets in an amalgamated way, and that's sort of semi-inappropriate in the sense that, you know, we need to look at specific suburbs and make a call on the basis of our brief. So I'll give you an example. If your brief is to generate substantial amount of equity in the next 2 years, then Perth could be a good play because you might have another 2 years to go. Now, when I say Perth, certain suburbs, yeah? If I'm going to answer that question in response to, you know, are they hotspots? Yes, they're hotspots. You know, how long did I have left? Year 2, something like that, you know? Yeah. When it comes to Brisbane, or I would better use the term Queensland, because Queensland is more appropriate, because Perth is a different kettle of fish when it comes to, you know, I guess, locality and how it works and the dynamics of the market. So in Queensland, you know, you have the Townsvilles of the world, like, for example, Curvin has seen 25% growth in the last year, you know, and some Townsville areas have. Do they have more legs than Perth? Yes, they do. How long? I wouldn't say 3, I will maybe say 2 years. There are hotspots. So if we're equating overcooked with hotspots, yes, I would say yes. Now, not every Queensland area is overcooked or a hotspot. We see some areas in Cairns moving from that warm spot to a hotspot territory. One of my favourite suburbs is Brinsmead. I'm not shilling suburbs here. I'm just saying for my brief, it's a good suburb. But, you know, Cairns potentially has a bit of different dynamics than Townsville.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's less, it would be less of a hotspot, although what I'm seeing in Cairns as well, even though some areas, I can see a bit of a price lag there, even though some areas are seeing potentially 5% growth in the last year, it's really becoming hard for buyers, agents and investors to locate assets in those areas, which is indicative that it's going to turn into a hotspot very soon.
Tightening market.
Yeah, that's right.
And yeah, definitely different economics.
Yeah,
between
Perth,
Cairns and
Cairns and Townsville, absolutely. Townsville is a great play, and I mean, I was engaged by a buyer's agent who wanted to find the next Perth, and it was a year ago, and it was very hard to really look away from Perth because everyone was making substantial amount of money. But they sort of had this implicit understanding that everything moves in cycles. So they said to me, okay, you know, Matt, can you develop a report for me and find areas for me? It was actually November the 2nd, I remember. So it wasn't a year ago. And I put forward 10 areas. Out of those 10, I think 10 areas, by areas I mean suburbs.
Yep.
Out of those 10, 6 were in Townsville. And they bought in Townsville, i.e. Curvin, and they made substantial amount of money. So Townsville was a great play. When they bought about a year ago, or let's say November last year, which would be 8 or 9 months or thereabouts, they were saying that there was not a lot of competition from buyers agents. Yeah. The owner-occupier demand started increasing, but they weren't elbowing their way through to secure an asset. Yep. Now it's becoming very hard. Now you see the shift between Townsville on the way to Cairns. Cairns has a bigger price point. You know, the Brinsmeads, the Red Lynches, the Bayview Heights of the world, they have a price point between, you know, $550 to $650.
Yeah.
So it's a bit bigger than Townsville. But, you know, we're seeing that shift. Now, when I say a shift, I don't mean Townsville investors are moving from Townsville to Cairns, but we can see investors piling up into Cairns more because Townsville has lost a bit of steam. Right. You still has legs to go. Yeah. But it's a hotspot. Yeah. And we've discussed, you know, the differences between hotspots and warm spots, and I guess the hallmarks of them.
Cairns is a very good example of a warm spot right now.
Cairns is in between a warm spot and a hotspot now.
Oh.
Yeah. Okay. So it's right there. You'll see areas.
It's on the cusp.
Okay, Bayview Heights has generated 8% growth in the last year. Brinsmead has generated 6. Red Lynch has generated about 7. So it's hitting that hotspot. As soon as you traverse past the 10% growth, all other things being equal, you're into a hotspot territory.
Yeah, right.
Because that usually translates to very low supply and high demand.
And then multiple offers.
Correct.
Which you don't want to get into.
Correct, yeah. So for big buyers agencies, it's suitable because they probably have more connections on the ground, connections with sales agents, and their purchasing power is greater. But for the buyers agents who are starting off in the beginning of their journey, where they don't have those connections established, it becomes really hard to find real estate in hotspots for their clients.
When should someone consider exiting or selling a property?
You know what? That's an answer for them personally, and it comes back to the deconstructed goal. Again, I'm not avoiding the answer, but I'm saying that it's not one size fits all solution. Essentially, if I had to reduce it to an answer, you would want to sell off when you see that the area is going to experience substantial negative growth. It has reached the bubble territory, which means that your asset is going to turn into a liability for X amount of years, which means you won't be able to generate equity and leverage into additional purchases. Now, you can never know exactly when that can happen and how much negative growth you'll see. But if you have increasing in affordability, a dropping of days on market, and a high supply, you should be worried that it's going to experience negative growth. So you can exit at that point. Now it all comes down to the, forceful nature of the trends and how forceful the trends are increasing in supply. And how much demand is reducing and how unaffordable it is. So there's a bit of discretion that needs to be applied there. But sometimes you can ride out the wave of negative growth for about a year, minus 5%. It doesn't really impact your portfolio. But again, it comes down to a deconstructed goal and what matters to you. If you can anticipate that you'll see minus 10% growth for 3 years, well, you really don't need that.
You'd rather just cash out now.
You'd rather cash out now.
And
it comes down to a mathematical equation. You know what I mean? What is my selling cost? What is my acquisition cost for the next asset? Is it worth it? Maybe those two costs actually equate to the negative growth that I'll see, so I just won't bother and we'll sell out.
Yeah, that's right.
It's all person dependent and specific,
Yeah. And what that particular person needs in their portfolio at that point in time.
Yeah, exactly.
If they need a cash out or not.
Exactly. I mean, constructing, we're working on producing that feature where you have a strategy attachment that will really help you out reverse engineer your goal. And because there's so many moving parts, it's hard to determine that and build it in an accurate way. But I think it's important for people to really consider that, and make some assumptions. Make some assumptions on CPI, make some assumptions on interest rates, make some assumptions on the growth, so you can actually, extrapolate where you're going to be in the next 10 years and go from that point on, and then come back to the initial purchase. So
is there any specific metrics that pinpoint specifically the local economy? The growth of the local economy.
So let's now. So I'm going to answer the question by asking you questions.
Yeah.
Okay. So what is the intent behind that question, or what is the intent behind our actions of purchasing property? The intent is growth. So why start at the economic layer, which is the macro aspect?
Yeah.
Why not start at the bottom with supply and demand? So again, reducing supply, increasing demand.
Yeah.
So that might happen because of economy.
Yeah.
But it might happen because of many other reasons. You want to go back, you want to understand behavioral patterns on the ground when it comes to purchasing property. Your goal is growth.
Yeah.
So look at the supply and look at the demand. Now, it could be because of economy. It could be because of that infrastructure spending that you mentioned, that we mentioned, It could be because, I'll give you an example. Southwest Growth Region in Sydney and Northwest.
Yeah.
Okay, they were branded as growth corridors 15 years before, which is when I bought the property. And by the way, I was going to buyer's agent seminars at that time, and everyone was investing in Gladstone. And I asked them, why not consider Southwest and Northwest regions? Oh, no, it's not on our radar, But what happened there is the New South Wales government is working on decentralisation. This is why Parramatta has become the next hub instead of only Sydney.
Yep.
The jobs are moving outward,
and
they wanted to build that area. And I think they were forecasting 500,000 residents actually coming to that area. So they were subsidising for that by building roads, bridges and hospitals. Now, they were doing that because of the population increase, i.e. the demand.
Yeah.
So if there's demand, if there's a population increase and if there's higher demand for property, that would reflect in the demand metrics that illicit behavior. So put it down to this.
Yeah.
So essentially, you and I are investors.
Yeah.
We want to go purchase property.
Yeah.
We go to open homes and we bid and we buy it. That home gets taken off and it gets reflected as a days on market metric. For example, that home was listed for sale for 15 days.
Yep.
Now, if that repeats for a couple of years, 5, 6, 7 years, and you can elicit a pattern, you can extrapolate behavior on the ground, whether that market is desired by investors or not. And then why do I need to... Now, understanding macroeconomics is very important, but we shouldn't overcomplicate things.
Yeah.
We should look at the trends.
Yeah.
Trends for longer periods of time to understand the behavior in a particular suburb. If a suburb is desired by investors, and if there's a reducing supply, the suburb will grow. Simple as that.
Yeah.
Now, the slopes of the curve of supply and demand metrics can give information regarding timing of entry. Okay, so what's a warm spot? We haven't touched upon that. A warm spot is an area that has a reducing supply, a flat demand. So a demand trend that's not reducing.
Yeah.
So a demand trend, let's say 30 days on market for the last 4 years. It's not changed. It's flat.
Yeah.
You know, but it has a reducing supply and a reducing vacancy rate trend. Okay.
Right.
Why reducing vacancy rate trend? When you see a reduction in the vacancy rate trend, you see increases in rents. When rents rise to a level where it becomes more sensible to own an asset as opposed to rent, the rental demand shifts to ownership, and then you start seeing a tilting in days on market.
Right.
Okay.
Got it. Yeah.
So look at the trends. When it comes to economy, you know, what your question was, you know, how can we see economic growth and how does economy develop? I mean, Google is our friend and we can see how much government's investing in particular economies. But then again, I always say, go back to the supply and demand trends and see whether that's reflected in individuals' willingness to buy an asset.
So what you're saying is go for trend, go for supply and demand.
Supply and demand trends, that is it. And then if you want to, and if you want, that would be the short term to midterm analysis, 1 to 4 years or 1 to 5 years, and then you layer it. And if you want to layer it further for long term prospects, then you look at socioeconomics, which could reflect economy in a way. You look at growth rate cycles. You look at renter to owner ratios. You look at hold periods. For example, how long do people actually hold on to an asset in a particular area? When you come to an area that has hold periods of 10 years, i.e., longer than one property life cycle, that reflects livability, but it also separates the influx of existing home by 10-year timeframes. Which means that it separates the introduction of new supply by large amounts of time. Economy is important, but what good is economy to me if it doesn't reflect in purchasing patterns on the ground? And again, you see that in a lot of WA areas. You see very wealthy areas that, you know, are declining in value, for example, some of them, because, again, industry centralization. So if I wanted to address your economy question, have a diversified economy. Have an economy that's earning an income from multiple sources. Look at the socioeconomics of the area, and then look at the supply and demand. Again, remember I said socioeconomics vary under different price points. But, you know, for a particular price point, look at the socioeconomics, look at the affordability of the area, how much people are making, how much it's going towards.
How much can they afford to repay?
How much can they afford to invest? And then look at the supply and demand. That is all you need to ascertain dynamics of an area. What I see, I give an example. That's a perfect question. So Townsville has a lot of investment and an increase in employment currently. And I see some buyers agents promoting Townsville now, because they're looking at these macroeconomic factors. And there's a lag. They've already missed the boat.
Yes.
They didn't look at if they were looking at trends a year ago or 2 years ago, it would have inadvertently implied what's going to happen now.
So going back to trends, because now we're unraveling this. So it's trend is your friend. That's the first thing. And supply and demand, right? Correct. So when we're looking at trend, the things that you said was... What was it? Affordability Index.
So short-term, long-term trend. Is first. Short-term trend indicates whether the trend is going to forcefully continue downward or upward. So you can split trend into two domains, short and long-term. Then you have to look at affordability. as well as each trend. Is it increasing forcefully, which means that it's impacting on behavioral patterns on the ground? The time lag could vary, but it will impact. If it's still affordable, that's phenomenal. And if you have good trends for supply and demand dynamics, you've set the stage for 1 to 4 year growth. Then, if you want to layer it further, look at socioeconomics, look at industry centralization and diversification, look at renter to owner ratio. Why renter to owner ratio? When macroeconomic conditions change in an area, where it becomes very hard to sustain and hold a property by investors, i.e. interest rates increases, and we saw some sell-offs from investors a year ago, that means that higher renter-to-owner ratios could potentially translate into oversupply down the track when interest rates start increasing. See how you're layering the time frames that can impact the supply by looking at different metrics. And then you can look at growth rate patterns to see how much an area has spent in the negative growth zone before. And if it has spent substantially, inadvertently implies there's something wrong with the economics of the area. It's all about layering, but layering on the basis of time frames and understanding time frames. Short time frame 1 to 2 years, short to midterm 1 to 4, long term 4 to 10, and then you layer the metrics with that respect, and you tick all of the boxes.
So the metrics align with the time frames?
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So it's not like an onion; it's more like a cake.
Correct. It's more like a cake. It's layering. It's all about layering and understanding. And this is how you can actually understand your brief better and know, okay, I want short-term growth, but I also want long-term performance. And that's how you layer the metrics in that way.
I'm more and more intrigued. I'm gonna be unraveling this program.
No, it's taken us years to
I bet. And the complexity.
That's right. And just think about it as a feedback loop in the sense that, we can't hide. If I say something and somebody acts upon that suggestion, sooner or later it will come back to me. You know what I mean? And there's both a positive and negative feedback loop. And luckily enough, knock on wood, we've had positive feedback loops where this warm spot methodology is playing out. And people are sending me emails every day from on the ground. Sales agents are saying this. I went to an open house. There was 10 people bidding for one home. All of this stuff gets fed back into the system, and we might produce a different metric to cover something that we haven't seen before. So it's like an evolving organism. You know what I mean? So we've gone a bit of a different way. So my business partner Alex, he was a senior software architect for Westpac. Really smart guy, and he builds the infrastructure for HtAG, and I understand the connections and the narrative, and so he does as well. But what we've done, and potentially we've done it in a wrong way, is that we spent 4 years building the product, and just after 4 years we started marketing the product. But we spent 4 years. By the way, in those 4 years we had subscriptions, we had feedbacks, and all of that. But we didn't even have one marketing campaign.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah. So we were building it and iterating it as the feedback was coming in, and it took us a long time, because it's one thing to have metrics provided to you on a page. It's yet another, remember at the onset when I said, it's yet another to actually construct it into a narrative that makes sense.
Correct.
Into this layer cake thing, you know. So you can find metrics anyway. CoreLogic provides them, but CoreLogic is not addressing the problem of strategic decision making. They're just providing a resource.
Correct.
We are not in the resource providing space. We are into a mastery providing space.
I think what you guys do really well is you provide the story behind the numbers.
Correct.
Which makes like an average person like me understand it and be able to make your own assessment and judgments and go, is this right or is that not right?
It needs to be a well-constructed argument. And by the way, again, when I say you can't hide, every argument that I put forward, I explain it in the way that I do. And I meet people on a regular basis where they question me on certain aspects, and then I need to explain it further, or I need to re-engineer what I'm saying and improve the product. And that's the beauty about communicating with our customer base and creating a community and then iterating the product. So I'm not saying that I know everything. I do say that the methodology that we've developed works. But, as societies moves, as data sets become larger, as new things, AI integrations now, for example, you can always produce better iterations. And let's say you might come to me and there's a lending component that I might consider, I don't know, mortgage stress metric, whatever it is, I don't know, something. By the way, we addressed that through Affordability Index.
Let's talk valuations.
But
kidding.
but there are certain things, that can be added to that cake,
yes,
essentially always. And the reason why I say this is not to say that our product doesn't work, is to always say, there's always room for improvement. And I don't claim to know everything, but what I do know, I know it well.
Yeah.
That's,
I think nobody can argue against that.
Thanks, mate.
Talk me through what the Affordability Index is.
So it is amalgam of a couple of metrics, and it's a proprietary metric that we developed at HtAG, or Sasha did, or his name is Alex, but I call him Sasha. And it's been actually featured in mainstream media. So it is nothing complex about it. But what's interesting is that was the missing piece to actually form a very coherent analysis. So it is, we use typical price, not median prices. We've written a methodology article online that highlights, so think about a scatter plot of purchase of sales on a screen.
Yeah.
So mediums go zigzag.
Yeah.
Typical price considers the entire scatter plot and produces a straight line. So it's a much more accurate representation of price movements.
Yeah.
So, and I can share the article with you, and you can share it with the audience as well. Alex has written an academic article on it, which is digestible. It's not like it's full on, statistics. Yeah. But going back to, so it considers typical price. It considers current interest rates plus a buffer, which will be, and when I say interest rates, I mean a cash rate, plus a buffer of 2 to 3% to reflect whatever the banks are lending at.
Happening at the moment.
Yeah. It considers medium incomes of families within that suburb.
Within
the suburb, so it's very context specific.
Wow.
And then it assigns 50% of that medium income to mortgage repayments, which inadvertently can highlight mortgage stress. That's what I'm saying. But it takes into account those 4 factors which make it really context specific and applicable.
Right. Wow. You guys take that to a real granular level.
That's right, because you need to, it's all about making an accurate decision and understanding the flow and effects, which is why never look at a metric in isolation. You need to construct a story, as you said. So going back to your question about when do I exit, when is it overcooked?
Yeah.
Well, you need to look at the affordability index, and you look at that bottleneck or a friction point or mortgage stress, and then layer it with other things so you can, create a story out of it, understand when it's cooked.
And then last one, you scraped on this one, owner-occupier ratio.
Owner-occupier ratio, so renter to owner-occupier ratio. Yeah, we have a data dictionary on our website which provides individuals with ranges when they're trying to set the filters or the algorithm. So usually, and every buyer's agent would say that you're looking at below 35%. Usually. So that's the range that I would usually set. But, as I said before, renter to owner ratio is important to consider because usually the rental stock is the investor stock. And when interest rates increase, some investors might not be able to hold on to that property and will sell off. And when they want to sell, that renter ratio or renter to owner ratio can turn into a supply stock.
Right.
It turns into supply. Yeah. And if there's an increasing supply and not enough demand to absorb it, you see price decline. So the renter to owner ratio, if I had to layer it in a cake, I usually use it as a long-term metric.
Yeah.
Because to me, it incites the potential for an influx of supply long-term when macroeconomic conditions change.
And so what's the ideal ratio? You said 30.
So 35 or less. 35 towards zero.
Right.
So 35 rentals.
Yep.
35% of rentals in an area.
Yep.
So 35 or less would be... now, everyone has a different theory or scenario and all of that, and you have variance between that. I'm not saying if it's 37, stay away from it,
It's just an idea.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly, yeah.
Can you share 3 areas below 500,000 price range that are likely to become hotspots over the next 2 years? Of course, this is not financial advice.
No, but what you're doing there is I don't have the data set in front of me, and I can't remember all of the areas. Australia wide, and also it relates back to the brief and what's required. I think that Melbourne has some good opportunities now, and I think Melbourne is a warm spot. 500k price point brings me 3 better. Now we also, you can invest in different bedroom types and all of that, and we have disparities between bedrooms that people take advantage of. Turn a 3 better into a 4 better, like a bit of a value add. I think brings me 3 better would be around 5 to 550. Melton West, Kurrajong are warm spots. So in the Melton area, some Melton South and Melton, I would stay away from, but Melton West and Kurrajong, I think, are good warm spot opportunities there. Again, depending on the brief, but we see people buying there as well. So what else under 500k? What's coming up on the list? It will be some Melbourne areas and potentially some Cairns areas. But for Cairns, in order to meet that price point, you will need to reduce the bedrooms. So the 4 bedrooms will be out of that price range.
Yeah. So you go to 2 or 3.
So you will go to 2 or 3 to get the market momentum, but meet that price range.
Yeah. And then going back to earlier conversation, Cairns is probably in that.
Yeah, Cairns is
starting to tip over.
Again, this is a perfect example of what your brief is. You know, if you have 2 years to wait, Melbourne is a play. But if you don't have 2 years, if you have only 1 year, Cairns is a better play. Do you know what I mean? So that's why the brief comes into.
How hungry and how fast do you want to go?
yeah, exactly. It all depends, But it depends on on your cash flow, your earnings, when you can borrow next as well. I mean, it's one thing to generate equity, but another thing to actually use it in leverage into additional purchases.
Yes.
So it's not only about this better than me. I mean, it's not only about equity generating. It's about can I borrow more? Can I borrow more?
Yeah.
So let's say hypothetically a deconstructed goal says that you can borrow in the next 2 years. So then Melton or Melbourne or Melton West or Kurrajong is the play.
Yeah.
But if you can borrow right away and you want to multiply the number of properties in your portfolio, then maybe Cairns is more towards, because it's coming towards that hotspot. And again, it all depends on time frame. Let's say if your time frame is 3 years and you want to get in and get out, then Townsville is also a good play for that price point.
Yes.
So again, it all comes down to time frame and the brief. And I always avoid answering those questions in a sense that to give an area, I hate shilling areas, because I'm against that happening online. And nothing against the question, don't get me wrong. I like the question. It's just that it's happening online a lot without context. And people are not aware of, when people say an area is good to invest in, the first thing that I say is for who and why, for how long. Do you know what I mean? Like, you got to ask these questions.
And first and foremost, what's the buyer's brief?
No, exactly. Yeah. So, but I could just say some of the areas that are coming up on the radar and where people are buying,
Yeah, thank you. You can answer these or not, but what are the top 3 do's for a property investor?
Education is the primary thing.
Yeah.
I think that the space is riddled with a lot of information that can be disadvantageous to individuals. And I think they really need to educate themselves and invest the time to understand, these metrics, how they relate to each other, what outcome they can produce, etc. I think that's the most important thing, whether it's a buyer's agent or an everyday investor, you need to really put in the time to understand. It's unfortunate that this industry is just, in a sense, it's fast-paced, and it's also judged on... Marketing has played a really negative role in the space, because... a good marketing campaign is usually equated to competence, and that's not the case. Which is why I think it's essential for investors and buyers agents to really educate themselves and understand. When I say education, people shouldn't think that it takes years to educate. In all honesty, and this is what I say to our mastermind community, it takes a week.
Yeah.
It takes a week to put in the work, look at the videos, understand. And then obviously out of that week, you're not going to come out knowing everything, but you're going to have a very solid foundation. So anything that's layered on top, coming back to the layer cake, is easily absorbed, and the penny keeps on dropping. So you need to invest one week into understanding the information and putting in the work. So that will be the most crucial thing for our space.
And then on the flip side, what are the do nots for property investors?
Do not listen to others when they tell you invest in this area. And I've just done it myself.
Yeah.
But I just said, where people are buying, but question me.
Yeah.
Question everyone. Go have a look. Go analyze what the area says. What is the analysis? don't follow the herd. And herd is a negative term. I don't think of people as the herd, but it's just a term that people use.
Yes,
just don't follow the group. Try to understand it for yourself. And now your understanding is not going to be complete. It's not going to be 100%, but develop that aptitude of being inquisitive.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And trying to understand why something is good and why something is bad. Again, comes back to a marketing campaign. People say top 3 suburbs to invest in. You know, if you want to know more, hit me up and I'll tell you.
Yeah.
It's just a marketing campaign.
Yeah.
It is a marketing campaign. It is clickbait. And when people tell you something is good, you need to analyze it whether it's good for you.
Love that.
That's it.
And also, you know, coming back down to that, you know, understand the supply and demand for yourself.
Yeah. Then you go layering that layer cake as we mentioned.
Yeah.
You know, but if you don't know how to layer the layer cake, ask questions. You know, I've always had the time for people. When people send me, you know, that comes with a caveat. You know, usually people contact me and assume that I'm their personal assistant. Well, I'm not. But if I see, and there's many examples where I see people really genuinely invest the time, mate, I can respond to emails at 2 a.m. because I want to, because that person I can see has invested the time. Has really invested the time, and I'll do anything. I never charge extra people. I really want to invest the time and pass on everything that I know. You know what I mean? Layering the cake can seem, you know, complex. It's really not, but you need to start somewhere. And if you are not sure, ask the questions. And if somebody tells you, whether it's me or someone else, have a look at this 10-minute video, and then, you know, ask me questions. Have a look at it, watch it. Yeah. Make notes. Yeah. See what you don't know, deconstruct it, then come back with questions. Anyone, me inclusive, and anyone else that sees you investing the time and you can see that from the questions. Yeah. You can't hide. Yeah. I can see from the questions whether somebody's watched the video or not. You know what I mean? Yeah. And if I see somebody's invested the time, I'll put everything down and I'll answer. Just it's interesting enough, you know, it's a financial decision that can completely reshape your life, and let alone we outsource decision making to someone else. Now, when I say we outsource, buyers agents are very valuable for the space and they're necessary, you know, but even the buyer's agent that you engage, they need to give you a rationale, an explanation of why things are good. They need to connect it to your brief. You need to be felt secure in their hands that they know what they're talking about. Yes. You know, why should I invest here? Because I said so. Yeah. And you're like, what? You know what I mean? Like so that's really dangerous, I think. Yeah, I 100% agree. Yeah. Self-education, self-knowledge is always golden. And it can't be taken away from you. Yeah. But if you don't, then you got to rely on a BA. No, see, this is the thing. People can educate themselves and still, we are time poor. Yeah. You know, you can always engage a BA, and a competent BA will change your life. Yeah. You know what I mean? But you can still educate yourself and understand what the BA is saying. Yes. We've seen we've seen some BAs ruin people's lives because people didn't actually, and most of my clients are BAs, but my clients are not like that. Yeah. You know what I mean? Because they invest the time, and I'm really careful who I let into the mastermind community and who I dedicate my time to. But we know many examples where BAs just ruin people's lives, which is the reason why we started the business, by the way. The reason behind HtAG was to provide information so people can actually educate themselves. You know what I mean? I almost feel like HtAG also, now that HtAG is around, it creates a baseline for everyone, in terms of it does. This is the expectation. It does, and we see a lot of investors use HtAG to check the buyers agents. Yes, and as I said and I teach this in the mastermind, our buyers agents, they know how to construct an argument, and our buyers agents, it takes them much sooner to close a client. Yeah, because everyone resonates to competence, to real competence. Yeah, not personalities. Yeah. You know, you can have a great personality, but you can see that something is fishy. It doesn't pass the smell test. You know what I mean? I like that. Yeah. That was really, really informative. I think we went close to an hour and a half already, unpacking all the ins and outs of data and analysis and how to actually pinpoint a warm spot and a hot spot, and, you know,
industry centralization, and
I can talk about this for hours, honestly. Like that's why I'm saying, like usually the podcast,
I feel like I definitely was a student in this episode. So thank you so much. And I was absolutely downloading all those gems. I think for anybody who finds this interesting and useful, absolutely rewind it, rewatch it. There's a lot of data and a lot of information there. But more importantly, connect with Matt.
Yeah, you can find me, LinkedIn, Facebook, anywhere. Send me an email. I'll share that information with you. So, it's fine. I'm always looking to help and add value if you have any questions. And it was really fun, man. I really enjoyed it, by the way. Thank you very much. The questions were phenomenal. I really liked it.
Hopefully they weren't too curly.
No, they were good. I like it. It was really good.
So thank you so much for watching this episode of Catching Up with Property. Stay tuned for our next one.
Take care, guys.